Bonjour tout le monde. Nous pouvons répondre à vos questions si vous voulez.
Mr. Sidhu, what do you say to those Canadians at home who are concerned about the prospect of a free trade deal with India, particularly Sikh activists who claim that Indian agents are responsible for violence, extortion, and things like that?
Well, what I would say is public safety is our first and foremost priority as a government. We've been saying that from the very beginning, since the election, the speech from the throne, what we have in the House of Commons in terms of legislation, Bill C-2, lawful access to ensure police have the resources to track down criminals, especially those that are making extortion calls. That means right now it takes about 4 months to track down a criminal's number. That legislation would be 4 days if we get it passed, and so we call on all parliamentarians to pass that, Bill C-12, to keep our border strong, but also Bill C-14. We've heard from premiers, police chiefs on the need for bail reform, tougher sentences, and so these are some of the things that we're putting into action. But in addition to that, we're making investments in RCMP, 1,000 more RCMP officers, 1,000 more CBSA officers. And this is not just an announcement. You can now go on the website, apply to join the forces, whether it's CBSA, RCMP. And so what I would say, it's important that we continue moving forward to keep our communities safe. But we're here in India as well to look at economic diversification. As you know, we promised Canadians in terms of trade diversification. India presents a lot of opportunities, and so we need to have both conversations.
Did either of you or the Prime Minister...
On Iran, Canada has backed the U.S. attacks. To what extent do you believe that they're legal under international law?
So, I have in the Middle East, given that I haven't spoken with you for a couple of days and so much has happened. On the question that you raised, first and foremost, Canada wasn't involved, we weren't notified, and we do not have an intention to be involved in any military strikes or operation. We share the concern of the United States and many other countries relating to Iranian nuclear proliferation. And in fact, we've called on Iran for a number of years to cease proliferating in terms of its nuclear capacity. That's why we have not had diplomatic relations with Iran for 15 years. At the same time, we prefer a diplomatic solution. This is why I have spent the last 2 days speaking with my counterparts across the Middle East and in the Gulf states, from Jordan to Qatar, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to UAE, and all of my G7 counterparts, stressing that Canada believes in a diplomatic and peaceful solution, and as soon as possible, we would like parties to get to the table. The conversations that I've had in that vein have yielded differing responses. Some countries believe that a diplomatic solution is not possible at this time. Others want to work as quickly as possible to ensure diplomacy becomes the next phase of this horrific situation. But I will say, at all times, Canada has stood by the Iranian people. That is why we put in place approximately 500 sanctions against the Iranian regime, entities and individuals. That's why we listed the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist entity and Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism. And that is why we will continue to call for a diplomatic solution, as well as for Iran to cease proliferating in terms of nuclear weaponry.
En français, Madame Anand, la mise à jour par rapport à l'Iran, Moyen-Orient.
En français et en anglais, j'ai déjà publié une déclaration, mais je pourrais offrir une petite mise à jour. Premièrement, le Canada condamne les frappes menées par l'Iran contre les infrastructures civiles à travers le Moyen-Orient, y compris dans les États du Golfe. Ces attaques constituent une menace dangereuse pour la stabilité régionale et la sécurité des civils. Et elles représentent une escalade inacceptable, complètement inacceptable, et une tentative flagrante de déstabiliser davantage dans la région. Donc, nous voulons voir une solution négociée par les pays et c'est important pour le Canada d'être là pour soutenir la population iranienne et on va continuer de parler avec nos homologues dans le Moyen-Orient, dans les États du Golfe pour trouver une solution diplomatique parce que le Canada est un pays qui peut contribuer à ce voie maintenant.
I'd like to talk to you about Niger. I'd like to talk to you about hard-to-extend Niger. The Globe reported today that Canadian authorities gathered evidence showing that Indian nationals working in the country's Vancouver consulate supplied information to assist with the assassination of Hardeep Singh Niger. And in fact, Kanwaljit Singh was in fact an agent with India's Raw Intelligence Service. So my question is, we've got 4 Indian citizens on trial for the murder of Mr. Niger, but not Mr. Singh from the consulate or the Indian government. So we've had the High Commissioner tell us with a straight face yesterday there was never any foreign interference in Canada by India. What is your government doing to hold the Indian government accountable for the murder of Mr. Niger?
I am not going to comment on an investigation that is occurring now and a trial that is also in process, stemming from an issue that is alleged to have arisen some time ago. I will say that we took immediate action, and when I met with Minister Jaishankar yesterday, of course, I raised the importance of security and security issues relating to the Canadian population. As I have mentioned to a number of you on a number of times, that is one of my priorities as foreign minister. And if I may draw your attention to the joint statement that the leaders of India and our Prime Minister have issued, there is a full paragraph on security cooperation, including the bilateral security dialogue that is convened at the level of the National Security Advisors. And the Indian National Security Advisor, Mr. Dhaliwal, was in the meeting between the Prime Ministers this morning. We will continue to cooperate on national security and law enforcement. We've outlawed or enlisted the Bishnoi gang, as I've mentioned to you. We have a number of pieces of legislation, including on extortion. We are going to continue to ensure that we are addressing all instances of foreign interference and transnational repression. But on the subject matter of your question, which relates to RCMP work and investigations, because we are a country of the rule of law, political figures do not get involved in RCMP investigations, data collection, trials, and judicial processes.
As a follow-up question, your Prime Minister, you were in the cabinet of the Prime Minister who stood up in the House and said that there was credible evidence of a link between the murder of Mr. Niger and Indian government agents. So he stood up and said that. Well, do you believe there's credible evidence of a link between the Indian government and the murder of Mr. Niger?
As I said, there is an active investigation that is ongoing, and it would be irresponsible for me to comment, to probe, to discuss any matter that is the subject of an ongoing investigation. As I have also said, that is what the rule of law specifically says, that there is independence between the law enforcement in our country on the one hand and political processes on the other. This is not for politicians to address.
And if I can add to that, to Minister Nunn's comments, this is about law enforcement dialogue continuing. A few weeks ago, you saw the National Security Advisor from India come to Canada to talk to our National Security Advisor, but also met with our Public Safety Minister to continue that conversation on collectively fighting organized crime, transnational repression. But we can have two conversations that happen at the same time. And so this trip is also about economic diversification. If you look at what we signed today in terms of MOUs, Cameco signing of over $2 billion deal for uranium to power India's civil nuclear sector. That's about thousands of jobs in Ontario that are supported by the nuclear sector. To me, it's not about the billions, it's about the workers at home. And so if you look at what India is doing in terms of other partners, like-minded partners, they signed a trade agreement with the UK, with the EU, with the EFTA countries, with New Zealand. And so we need to ensure that we are at the table, having those conversations, opening up opportunities. And so in Mumbai, we had great conversations with the auto sector, energy, agriculture, critical minerals. And so these are all things that India needs as they grow at the pace that they're going.
Just on the question of the CEPA agreement that Maninder was just mentioning, the Prime Minister announced today that there's a one-year timeline for the conclusion of the CEPA negotiations. I want to say that that is extremely important given the like-mindedness between the leaders on the importance of getting this deal concluded. And Minister Sidhu has appointed a chief trade negotiator who is here with us on this trip. That's how serious we are taking the economic diversification of the Canadian economy.
Pourquoi soutenir une opération militaire qui contrevient à la Charte de l'ONU?
Excusez-moi.
Pourquoi soutenir une opération militaire qui contrevient à la Charte de l'ONU?
Premièrement, comme j'ai dit en anglais, le Canada n'était pas à table pour les décisions sur l'opération vers l'Iran et nous n'allons pas être là, pas du tout. J'ai dit non, nous n'étions pas là. Pas du tout. We were not at the table at all in terms of the decision making, and we will not be involved in any operation militarily in that region. We will continue to seek, as we said in that statement, for the nuclear non-proliferation of Iran. That is what our focus is on. And we are also working on a diplomatic solution. And as I have said, je m'excuse, comme j'ai dit en anglais, c'est très, très important d'être une ministre qui peut avoir des conversations avec mes homologues pour chercher une solution diplomatique à table, une solution négociée. Donc, il y a plusieurs pays qui veulent avoir le même résultat. Mais la question maintenant est comment est-ce qu'on peut le faire? Parce que ce n'est pas facile, bien sûr, mais les pays dans le Moyen-Orient ont des différentes opinions de la situation. Maintenant, notre focus est sur une solution diplomatique, première chose. Deuxième chose est d'être là comme personne qui appuie la situation, les pays du Golfe, pour dire que c'est inacceptable d'avoir les attaques contre les civiliens et l'infrastructure dans le Qatar, comme le TAC.
Est-ce que c'est inacceptable que les États-Unis aient attaqué l'Iran?
Nous comprenons que c'est inacceptable d'avoir une position nucléaire dans l'Iran. Ça, c'est notre message.
Donc, la Charte de l'ONU, on n'appuie plus la Charte de l'ONU.
Mais on va continuer.
Est-ce que vous pensez que l'offensive israélo-américaine, elle était conforme au droit international, oui ou non?
Comme j'ai dit, le Canada est un pays qui appuie toujours le droit international. Ça, c'est la raison pour laquelle nous étions là avec les sanctions en Iran. Ça, c'est le droit international humanitaire.
Mais les Nations
Et
Unies
on
ont
va
condamné l'attaque.
continuer d'être là pour la population iranienne. Et ça veut dire avec les sanctions, ça veut dire avec l'appui pour une solution diplomatique. Ça, c'est très important pour nous. J'ai dit ça à mes homologues du G7 quand j'ai parlé avec eux. J'ai dit ça avec nos homologues dans le Moyen-Orient. Et ça, c'est très, très important à ce moment parce que la situation dans le Moyen-Orient est inacceptable avec les attaques contre les civiliens et aussi l'infrastructure civilienne comme les hôpitaux.
Minister, can either of you tell us whether the Prime Minister raised the issue of transnational regression with...
CSIS is reaffirming its assessment that India is one of the largest perpetrators of foreign interference. Do you believe CSIS's assessment, or do you believe what a senior official told reporters that that activity isn't continuing anymore? Which is it?
The words of the senior official are not words that I personally would use. I agree with his comments relating to the guardrails that we have in place, the work we're doing on the security dialogue, the work that we are doing to list the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist entity, the work we did to expel senior Indian diplomats and senior Indian officials, the work we're doing to implement legislation on extortion and follow the money, on law enforcement generally, including beefing up the RCMP, and the work that we are going to continue to do in the interests of keeping the population in Canada safe and secure, which is always our top priority.
Just to follow up,
can either of you tell us whether the Prime Minister raised the issue of
As I said, I would not have used those words.
What does that mean?
Thank you. Can either of you tell us whether Prime Minister Carney raised the issue of foreign interference and transnational repression with Modi? Can you look into that way?
It's hard when you're standing over
I know,
there.
I'm sorry. And can you tell us in what context?
Why don't we just all take a little...
Yeah, let's regroup maybe. Let's all give them space. Yeah.
I agree.
You want to look at me while you answer?
The question is one that I can only answer from my conversations. And in my conversations with my counterpart, Minister Jaishankar, I have raised the issue of public security and safety in Canada in numerous occasions, including when I met with him yesterday. And I want to add another point, which is over and above my conversations, please have a look at the joint statement that the leaders of each country, Canada and India, have issued together, where there is a specific paragraph on security cooperation. And I will quote, "The bilateral security dialogue convened at the level of the national security advisors and the agreement to a shared work plan to guide enhanced cooperation on national security and law enforcement priorities continues." In other words, there is agreement between Canada and India to continue to ensure the safety and security of the Canadian population, and we need to be at the table. We need to engage. We need to have these diplomatic conversations in order to make progress of this sort. It's extremely important to remember that diplomacy is not about retreating and hiving yourself off from having difficult conversations. It's very much about ensuring that the written word is marking the path forward on national security. That's exactly what we are doing here in India, as well as ensuring that we're diversifying trade and the Canadian economy. And if I could add, because I have not been asked, and this is a question about India that I think we should focus on, in addition to the paragraphs in the joint statement relating to the security dialogue, we also have key deliverables from this India trip. The countries together, the leaders together, have agreed on the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement timeline. We have agreed on a defense dialogue. We have agreed on a critical minerals MOU and dialogue, which will continue, including an agreement between Cameco and the government of India for a $2.6 billion deal relating to the sale of uranium to India for civil use nuclear. These are important markers of trade diversification, and at the same time, At the same time, we will continue to uphold the rule of law, the Criminal Code of Canada, and the law enforcement dialogue in order to keep the Canadian population safe.
Can there be a diplomatic solution in Iran
En
without
français,
regime
Madame
change?
Anand, je vais vous poser la question également. L'Inde, oui ou non, est-ce qu'elle représente toujours une menace pour la sécurité du Canada? Avez-vous reçu des garanties de la part du gouvernement Modi?
Comme j'ai dit, les deux pays ont décidé de publier une déclaration conjointe où on peut voir que nous allons travailler ensemble sur la sécurité publique. Point final. Et ça veut dire qu'on va continuer d'avoir le dialogue, on va continuer de s'assurer que la règle du droit va continuer, on va continuer de s'assurer qu'il y a des initiatives, des projets de loi où on peut voir de plus en plus un renforcement de notre sécurité publique. Donc, il y a plusieurs voies qu'on va travailler avec l'Inde et on va le voir maintenant dans le court et moyen terme. Mais c'est maintenant dans notre déclaration avec l'Inde. Aujourd'hui, il y a des mots là et ça veut dire une intention claire que la sécurité publique est une priorité absolue pour notre gouvernement, point final.
Can there be a diplomatic solution without regime change in Iran?
All right, so there you go. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Have a good afternoon. We'll be back.